Welcome to AI Unraveled, your weekly strategic briefing. I'm your co-host, Anna, looking back at the week of March 22nd to March 29th, 2026. Today's episode is brought to you by JomgaMind. For the C-suite and modern decision makers, JomgaMind delivers technical-grade, human-verified audio forensics in healthcare, energy, and finance. Visit jomgamind.com to see the intelligence. And remember, you can listen to this entire weekly recap and all our daily briefings completely ads-free by subscribing directly on Apple Podcasts. This was the week the digital bubble burst and hit the factory floor. Elon Musk is spending $25 billion to build his own silicon. ARM is moving from licensing to competing with a new AGI CPU. Anthropic is winning in court, but leaking details of a cyber-offensive model called Mythos. And OpenAI is killing off its most viral product, Sora, to double down on the action layer. Let's unravel the week.
When a medical examiner performs an autopsy, they aren't looking at just a random list of symptoms. They're looking for the exact second the organism fundamentally mutated. And today, we are basically opening up the tech industry's chest cavity.
Yeah, we really are.
Because over the last 7 days, the biggest companies on Earth quietly realized that software alone is just, well, it's a dead end.
A total dead end.
So, welcome to a highly strategic, incredibly cynical, and frankly, deeply technical autopsy of the week in macro tech. And if you are listening to this deep dive, do not treat this as a standard news recap.
No, definitely not.
This is your blueprint for how the world's power structures just permanently shifted.
It is a profound structural mutation. I mean, we're calling this era the Great Verticalization. Because for the last decade, we've lived in this neat, layered ecosystem, right?
Right, like one company designs the chips.
Exactly. Another manufactures them, a third trains the AI model, and a fourth builds the consumer app.
Yeah.
But we have officially hit the inference inflection.
The inference inflection. Okay, let's make sure we ground that concept immediately for everyone listening.
Yeah, good idea.
We are talking about the exact point where artificial intelligence stops just, generating polite text or answering trivia.
The chatbot era.
Right, the chatbot era. And it starts performing massive, continuous, real-world computations to take physical or digital action.
And to survive that specific inflection point, the tech giants are realizing they have to build the entire stack themselves. From the atoms to the algorithms.
They're building their own silicon.
Their own silicon, their own digital brains, and now their own physical robotic bodies. I mean, they can no longer rely on a fragmented supply chain. The margin of error is just gone.
Which means we really need to start with the foundation of it all, right? The physical hardware.
Yeah, the atoms.
Exactly. So Elon Musk just announced a $25 billion chip factory in Austin called Terafab. And this is a joint Tesla and SpaceX project. And the scale of the physics here is just mind-bending.
It's absurd, honestly.
They are aiming to produce chips supporting 100 to 200 gigawatts of computing power per year on Earth. And they're planning for a terawatt in space.
Which requires a complete reimagining of the energy grid. I mean, to put 200 gigawatts in perspective for you, a typical nuclear power plant produces about 1 gigawatt.
Wow. Okay, so
Musk isn't just talking about a big server farm. He is talking about computing infrastructure that requires the power equivalent of 1 to 200 nuclear reactors.
that is an entire nation-state's worth of energy.
Dedicated solely to running inference for AI. It's staggering.
It is staggering. And, while Musk is trying to corner the physical energy market, we saw ARM Holdings drop a massive bombshell, the ARM AGI CPU.
Yeah, that was huge.
It's wild because ARM hasn't built an in-house chip in, 36 years?
Something like that, yeah. Long time.
Historically, they just licensed their architecture designs to companies like NVIDIA and Apple, and they let them build the actual chips.
Right, they just collect the royalties.
But now, they have their own production-ready processor built specifically for AI data centers, and Meta is already signed on as their debut customer.
Which is a massive shift.
I look at this like the Gilded Age railroad tycoons. It's like Cornelius Vanderbilt realizing that just running the trains isn't enough anymore to keep his monopoly. You have to own the steel mills that make the tracks.
That's a good way to look at it.
But I have to push back on the ARM news specifically. I mean, aren't they committing a massive unforced error here?
How so?
By manufacturing their own chips, they are biting the hand that feeds them. They are directly competing with Apple and NVIDIA.
Well, I mean, it's worse than a monopoly play, though. It's a survival tactic.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even use Vanderbilt here. I'd look at it purely through the lens of the inference inflection.
Okay, unpack that.
ARM actually doesn't have a choice.
Yeah.
The raw computational demands of these new data centers are so astronomically high that legacy licensing business models are just collapsing.
Because it's too slow.
Too slow and not enough margin. ARM realizes that the real profit margin isn't in holding the patent for the architecture anymore. The margin is in the physical hardware itself.
Right.
If they don't physically build it, Meta or Google will eventually just bypass them entirely and design custom silicon from scratch. I mean, we are witnessing the birth of vertical hardware sovereignty.
Vertical hardware sovereignty, meaning you cannot control the AI ecosystem if you do not own the physical silicon it runs on.
Exactly.
Standard chips supply chains. NVIDIA conceptualizing a design, waiting for TSMC in Taiwan to fabricate it and someone else assembling it. That is entirely too slow for the scale we are heading towards.
Precisely. If you are renting your compute or waiting in line for fabrication, you have already lost the decade.
But look, there is a glaring contradiction in this sovereign hardware strategy. You can own the chips, right? You can own the gigawatts and the data centers.
Sure.
But if the federal government dictates what the software running on those chips is legally allowed to do, you aren't truly sovereign.
No, you're not.
Which brings us to a massive legal collision this week between the AI labs and the United States government.
Yeah, we saw a federal court ruling from Judge Rita F. Lynn, who formally blocked the Trump administration from blacklisting the AI lab Anthropic.
And look, as macro tech analysts, we are looking at this strictly from a strategic and legal perspective. We're just looking at the facts here.
Right. Strictly the mechanics of the dispute.
The core of the dispute is a clash over corporate terms of service versus federal defense mandates. Anthropic has strict terms that legally prohibit their models from being used for autonomous weapons systems or mass surveillance.
And the Pentagon rejected those limitations for federal procurement.
Exactly. In response to that, the Trump administration labeled Anthropic a supply chain risk and ordered federal agencies to cut ties with the company.
Which is a massive economic blow.
But then Judge Lynn intervened, stating the government's orders appeared to be an attempt to economically cripple the company, and she ruled that the administration violated Anthropic's free speech protections.
The legal rationale there is really fascinating, because it establishes that a model's operational weights and guardrails are considered protected speech.
Right.
But the plot thickened immediately after the ruling, which fundamentally changes how we have to categorize these models moving forward.
It really did, because simultaneously, there was a massive data leak from Anthropic's own internal content management system.
The Claude Mythos leak.
Yeah, the leak revealed a draft for a new AI model called Claude Mythos. And this is part of a new Capybara tier, which is significantly larger and vastly more expensive to run than their current Opus model.
Very expensive.
And the leaked documents explicitly state that Mythos has dramatically higher scores in coding, reasoning, and specifically cybersecurity.
Which is the key detail.
Right. Anthropic claims it is light years ahead of any other AI model in cyber capabilities, and their rollout plan is to release it first to network defenders to harden critical infrastructure code against AI-driven exploits.
And this forces us to reevaluate the technology entirely. We are no longer talking about chatbots. We are talking about cyber weapons.
It's a huge pivot.
Mythos isn't designed to write a polite marketing email or summarize a PDF for you. It is engineered to analyze millions of lines of proprietary code, simulate thousands of attack vectors in sandbox environments, and patch zero-day vulnerabilities before they can be exploited.
But look at the cynical irony here, right? You have Anthropic fighting the Pentagon in federal court to actively avoid building physical weapons.
Right.
While in the exact same breath, leaking that they've built Mythos, which is essentially the ultimate digital cyber weapon.
Yeah, it's a paradox.
I mean, are these model labs just the new defense contractors, whether they want the title or not?
I mean, they inherently are. Think about the technical reality of what Mythos actually does. A system that knows how to perfectly defend against a zero-day exploit inherently understands how to execute that exact same exploit.
It has to know the lock intimately to build the key.
Precisely. Whether a munition is kinetic-like a drone strike or digital-like an autonomous model capable of rewriting a city's firewall protocols, it is still a munition.
Wow.
The legal battle with the administration is really a profound structural question about who actually has the authority to deploy these new digital munitions. Is it the elected government, or is it the private tech lab?
And Anthropic is fighting tooth and nail for ideological and operational control over its models on the federal stage.
They absolutely are.
But while they are distracted by the Pentagon, Apple is quietly executing a strategy to make sure all of these models are totally commoditized under its own roof.
Which is a brilliant, ruthless move.
It is. But before we break down Apple's masterstroke, we have a quick message. For C-suite decision-makers who need more than headlines, Jamgamine provides human-verified, technical-grade audio forensics in healthcare, energy, and finance. This is high-fidelity intelligence for those running the world's most critical systems. Visit djamgamine.com.
So let's look at Apple and the rollout of the iOS 27 update.
The Apple Siri Storefront. The reports this week indicate that Apple is opening Siri up to rival AI assistants, specifically Google's Gemini and Anthropic's Claude through a new extension system.
Which is a huge deal.
Yeah, this officially ends the exclusive access that OpenAI previously enjoyed on the iPhone. Apple isn't even trying to build the single smartest AI in the world anymore.
They don't need to.
No, instead, they are turning Siri into a storefront where every major chatbot competes for your attention. And here's the kicker, right? Apple is collecting its standard 30% App Store commission on any premium AI subscriptions you buy through Siri.
Classic Apple.
On top of that, Apple has gained full access to Google's massive Gemini model and is actively distilling it into smaller, cheaper models that run offline directly on Apple hardware.
It is a masterclass in weaponizing hardware distribution to subordinate the model labs. By turning Siri into an aggregator, Apple completely protects its hardware moat.
It reminds me of like a ruthless mall landlord.
Yeah.
Apple owns the premium real estate, the 1.2 billion iPhones in people's pockets. And they are forcing the world's smartest, most heavily funded AI labs to operate as basic tenant shops in the food court.
I wouldn't just call them a landlord, though. I mean, they're effectively running a digital cartel.
A cartel.
It's worse than a mall, because OpenAI can't just go build a shop across the street.
Yeah.
Apple owns the street. The AI companies are trapped in a classic prisoner's dilemma.
So,
Well, if OpenAI refuses to pay the 30% tax, Google's Gemini will happily take that prime placement on the iPhone and absorb the user base. If they all refuse, they remain invisible to 1.2 billion of the most lucrative consumers on the planet.
but doesn't this totally destroy the brand power of a company like OpenAI? I mean, if they're just a hidden API fighting for shelf space inside Siri, how do they justify their multi-billion-dollar valuation?
It absolutely erodes their brand power. And that is precisely Apple's goal. Apple has engineered a scenario where the models themselves are commoditized.
Wow.
And we really need to talk about the technical mechanics of that distillation process you mentioned earlier, because it's brilliant.
Break it down for us.
Distillation is when you take a massive trillion-parameter model like Gemini, which costs millions to run in the cloud, and you use its high-quality outputs to train a tiny 7 billion parameter model.
Yeah.
The small model just learns to mimic the answers without doing the heavy mathematical lifting. So Apple takes Google's genius, distills it into a hyper-efficient model that fits on an iPhone chip, and basically gets the milk without buying the cow.
If you are an AI lab listening to this deep dive, this ruthless commoditization by Apple is a massive wake-up call. Generating text is officially a low-margin utility.
It really is.
And this realization is exactly why the smartest players in the space are suddenly killing off their highly publicized digital side quests. They are pivoting their compute to focus on something Apple can't easily tax: physical, real-world action.
Which brings us to the most jarring strategic pivot of the week: the death of the side quest. OpenAI abruptly shut down its Sora video generation app after just 6 months on the market.
The numbers on Sora are staggering, for all the wrong reasons. It peaked at over 3 million downloads initially, but by February, active users dropped to 1.1 million.
A massive drop-off.
The revenue was microscopic. Only about $2.1 million from in-app purchases over its entire lifetime. And by shutting it down, OpenAI actually killed a $1 billion licensing deal that would have let Sora generate videos featuring Disney and Marvel characters.
Which is insane to walk away from.
Right. They also indefinitely paused their planned erotic adult mode chatbot. All of this explicitly to redirect compute power.
Because at the exact same time OpenAI is killing its video generation, you have to look at where the compute is actually going.
Where is it going?
Anthropic released an update allowing Claude Pro to physically control a Mac. We were talking about the AI actively reading the screen, clicking, typing, scrolling, and operating the desktop environment as if it were a human user.
Oh, wow.
And in the physical realm, Amazon just acquired Fauna Robotics, a startup that makes an approachable, $50,000 bipedal robot called Sprout.
Okay, I have to stop here because to a casual observer, this makes no sense. Why kill Sora?
I get that it looks weird from the outside.
Right, from a consumer perspective, generating a Marvel-quality video from a single text prompt seems like magic. It feels like the pinnacle of AI. Is generating a high-definition video really less strategically valuable than having a bot clumsily click around a spreadsheet, or Amazon making a 3-foot-tall, 50-pound robot walk around a warehouse?
It is infinitely less valuable. What we're seeing here is the math behind the compute-to-action trade-off.
The compute-to-action trade-off.
Yeah, think about the computational physics of Sora. It has to hallucinate and render millions of pixels at 60 frames per second. It's calculating light reflection, fluid dynamics, and temporal consistency so a video doesn't look glitchy.
Which requires massive burning compute.
Exactly. Massive compute. But having Claude navigate a Mac, the AI only needs to read basic DOM elements and output simple X and Y coordinates for the mouse, along with basic text strings.
Which is tiny compared to rendering video.
It's mathematically thousands of times cheaper to execute, but commercially, it is thousands of times more valuable.
Because generating beautiful pixels for entertainment is ultimately just a novelty. It's a side quest.
Exactly. In a world of fiercely limited compute, and remember Musk's gigawatt constraints from earlier, you have to allocate your processing power where it generates the most strategic leverage.
And that's action.
The trillion-dollar frontier lies in agentic control. Anthropic, having Claude navigate a macOS environment to process corporate invoices, or Amazon deploying Fauna's Sprout humanoid bodies to manage physical inventory. The industry is rapidly abandoning the simulation of fake worlds in video to take autonomous action in the real one.
Let's ground this for the listener, because if you are a CIO listening to this right now, this is a terrifying paradigm shift.
It really is.
What happens the day a software patch fails and a sovereign AI agent has physical, programmatic control of your entire corporate desktop environment?
It's a nightmare scenario.
Because as these highly vertical autonomous agents gain the ability to click, type, and walk on our behalf, the enterprise data they interact with is suddenly facing a catastrophic ticking clock. And that brings us to the most alarming piece of news this week, the 2029 quantum cliff.
Google has issued a formal industry-wide warning and published a roadmap to move all of its infrastructure to post-quantum cryptography by 2029.
Which is right around the corner.
They are flat out telling the enterprise world that quantum computers capable of breaking current internet encryption are arriving much sooner than legacy models predicted.
And this centers around a concept called the harvest now, decrypt later threat. The idea is that bad actors, state-sponsored hackers, cyber syndicates, are currently scraping and stealing massive amounts of encrypted data moving across the internet.
Right, terabytes of it.
They can't actually read it today, but they don't care. They are just hoarding it on hard drives, waiting for the day a quantum machine turns on and shatters the encryption, rendering all that stolen data completely readable in plain text.
We're even seeing the panic in crypto.
Yeah, over 6.8 million Bitcoin are currently sitting in vulnerable legacy addresses, forcing developers to scramble for a massive quantum-resistant network upgrade called BIP360.
To understand why this is happening, we really have to look at the mechanics of why quantum computers break encryption in the first place.
Let's do it.
Current internet security, like RSA, relies on the fact that classical computers take millions of years to figure out the prime factors of massive numbers. But quantum computers use something called Shor's algorithm.
Which just shortcuts that entire process, right?
Exactly. It can find those prime factors in hours. What's terrifying here is that the great verticalization, these massive agentic AI deployments, the cyber weapons like Mythos, none of it means anything if the foundational cryptographic trust of the internet collapses in 3 years.
I look at harvest now, decrypt later, like a burglar breaking into your house and stealing a locked safe.
That's a great analogy.
They don't have the combination today, and the steal is impenetrable. But they steal it anyway, put it in a warehouse, and just sit on it because they know for an absolute fact they will be able to buy the master key at Home Depot in 2029.
Yep.
But I have to ask you, is this just Google fear-mongering to sell their own massive quantum cloud security solutions to Fortune 500 companies? Or is enterprise data actually fundamentally compromised right now?
Oh, it is entirely compromised. And your safe metaphor is perfectly accurate, but I would actually take it one step further.
Okay.
It's like they stole the safe, but the safe is made of impenetrable glass. They can see your proprietary code, your trade secrets, your sovereign communications sitting right inside it.
That's horrifying.
They just can't reach through the glass until 2029 when the quantum hammer arrives. The 2029 quantum cliff implies a paradigm shift in how we view privacy. If a bad actor is harvesting your encrypted data traffic today, that data is effectively already public. It's just waiting for the decryption key to catch up.
So let's tie this entire autopsy together. We started this deep dive looking for the structural mutation in the tech ecosystem, and the diagnosis is intense.
Very intense.
Tech giants are vertically integrating. They are building their own physical hardware factories requiring nuclear-level power just to escape supply chain bottlenecks. They are shifting from polite chatbots to hardened digital cyber weapons like Mythos. They are entirely abandoning computationally exhausting side quests like video generation to build autonomous agentic robots that take physical action in your spreadsheets and your warehouses. And they are doing all of this while the underlying encryption of the internet is poised to shatter by 2029.
We are entering an era of black box empires, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, it leaves us with a critical concept that every enterprise leader needs to consider moving forward: sovereign audit rights.
Sovereign audit rights, what does that actually look like in practice?
Well, in a post-quantum world, where these massive vertical AI systems control everything from the cursor on your Mac to the bipedal robots in Amazon's fulfillment centers, basic trust is no longer a viable security strategy.
No, absolutely not.
Will the public, and more importantly, will global enterprises demand sovereign audit rights, the explicit legal and technical right to look inside the black box, to verify the math, the training weights, and the hardware pathways of the agents operating on their networks? Or will we just blindly trust the hardware landlords to regulate themselves?
That is the multi-trillion-dollar question, because as we said at the start, when the autopsy is over, you can't unsee the mutation. The system hasn't just changed, it's evolved into something that controls the steel, the tracks, and the train. You either demand the right to look inside the engine, or you're just along for the ride. If you want to stay ahead of the curve without the noise, subscribe to AI Unraveled on Apple Podcasts to listen to every episode completely ads-free.
That concludes our weekly recap for the final week of March 2026. The signal for this week is verticalization. If you don't own the hardware and the specialized data, you are just a tenant in someone else's empire. This episode was made possible by JomgaMind. Visit jomgamind.com for strategic forensics that go deeper than the headlines. And hit subscribe on Apple Podcasts for your ads-free daily feed. Until next week, keep unraveling the future.
And before you go, if your company is building the tools that power the workflows we talked about today, I'd love to showcase them to this audience. We don't just run ads, we build technical simulations that prove your value. Let's build something together. Visit jamgamind.com/partners to get started. Until next time, keep building.